Your windows will get you killed. Not the door, not the roof, the glass. During World War II, over 60% of civilian injuries in bombing raids weren't from fire or collapsing buildings. They were from flying glass. In London alone, shattering windows sent over 86,000 people to emergency rooms during the Blitz. But here's the part no one talks about. Looters caused even more damage after the bombs fell. Today, same story. According to FBI crime data, 23% of all home invasions start at the window. And during blackouts or civil unrest, that number skyrockets. In Hurricane Katrina's aftermath, over 50% of homes hit by looters were entered through broken windows. Most people still think a lock and a curtain are enough. They're not. What you're about to learn are 8 forgotten WWII window tricks. Real defenses used by real people under siege that outsmarted bombs, burglars, and enemy soldiers. Cheap, brutal, brilliant. And every single one can still work today, if you know how to build them. So, without further ado, here are the 8 forgotten World War II window tricks that outsmart looters and intruders. Let's start from number 8. The Sandbag Sill Shield. Why World War II families pile dirt under their windows. Now this one sounds ridiculous, until you realize it saved lives. In the rubble-strewn streets of 1943 Warsaw and besieged Stalingrad, the smartest families didn't just fortify their basements, they looked up and down at the most overlooked weak point in the house, the windowsill. Here's what they discovered. When looters, saboteurs, or desperate deserters came crawling around neighborhoods, windows were the first target. And while everyone thinks about reinforcing the pane or adding bars, few realize the structural vulnerability at the bottom of the window. During World War II, thousands of homes in active war zones added miniature sandbag barriers directly on the interior sill, not just for protection against flying debris, but to absorb impact from small arms fire, bricks, and crowbars. The sand absorbed force. The weight slowed intrusions. And the sheer mess of having to deal with a wall of packed dirt kept intruders moving on. Today, modern homeowners and preppers can recreate this wartime trick with sandbag pillows, compact aesthetic canvas sacks you can fill with sand or pea gravel, and line along the interior sill. You get insulation, bullet resistance, and impact deflection all in one. In fact, a 2007 FEMA study showed that a 6-inch sandbag layer can reduce projectile velocity by over 75%. That's enough to stop a hammer or slow down a bullet. It's not glamorous, but it works. It turns your pretty little window into a functional barricade. And here's the kicker. Looters hate resistance. They don't want to struggle. They want fast access. Even a few seconds of resistance at the sill can make the difference between a drive-by smash and grab and your home being passed over entirely. Number 7. The Booby curtain rattle trap. Silent alarms from 1942 London. Alright, let's get into something clever and almost laughably simple. Picture this. It's 1942, and bombs are dropping over London. Not all the damage is from the air, though. Blackouts made the city a paradise for opportunistic looters, prowlers, and even Nazi sympathizers looking to sneak into homes. With most men off fighting, civilians, especially women, got creative. Enter the Booby curtain rattle trap, a forgotten World War II technique that turned your grandmother's drapes into an early warning system. Here's how it worked. Civilians would sew or pin metal washers, tin shards, or small bells into the folds of blackout curtains. When a window was disturbed, whether cracked, rattled, or slightly opened, the curtain would sing. Not loudly, but just enough to alert anyone nearby that something was wrong. It wasn't about scaring intruders. It was about buying seconds to react, grab a weapon, or sound an alarm. And those seconds, they mattered. Home defense during World War II was personal. People didn't wait for help. They became the help. Fast forward to now. This method still holds up. Today's preppers are bringing this idea back using modern magnetic sensors, string-attached vibration alerts, or even just a strand of decorative bells along curtain rods. Even a slight tug triggers a sound. Think of it as a low-tech, no-battery motion alarm. And here's a stat for you. In a 2015 UK burglary study, homes with sound-producing window defenses had a 43% lower chance of being fully breached, even when the system was primitive. That's because noise is the one thing intruders can't control. So next time you're adjusting your curtains, maybe it's time to think less about aesthetics and more about turning them into your first line of auditory defense. Number 6. The painted glass camouflage. How civilians used art to outsmart attackers. Now here's one that's borderline genius, because it's psychological, not physical. In the battle-ravaged suburbs of World War II Berlin and parts of rural France, civilians had a trick so bizarre, so unexpected that modern home security experts barely believe it. They painted their windows, not to cover them up, but to camouflage them as something else entirely. Kitchens became fake storage sheds. Living rooms became disguised bunkers. Why? Because when the enemy doesn't know what's behind the glass, they hesitate. Intruders, especially looters, rely on information, visual cues about what's worth stealing. So when a window appears broken, boarded, or abandoned, it's often ignored. This wartime trick turned visible glass into a psychological smokescreen. Civilians painted over windows with grime-colored shades, fake boards, or storage silhouettes, often using cheap soot mixed with glue or brown paint. From the outside, the house looked ransacked or worthless. It fooled looters, bypassed scouting, patrols, and gave families the edge. Today, the concept lives on in survival communities who use privacy window films with urban camouflage patterns or semi-transparent vinyl art to confuse prying eyes. You can buy adhesive decals that make your window look shattered, boarded up, or even bricked over, and they cost less than a pizza. And in home defense psychology, confusion is everything. A confused looter is a delayed looter, and a delayed looter is one you can catch, confront, or avoid entirely. Just think about that. A painted sheet of glass bought families precious hours in 1944, and in a grid-down crisis, it might just do the same for you. Don't underestimate the power of visual deception. It doesn't just hide your valuables, it rewrites the mind of your enemy. Number 5. The false window board up. Why empty frames fooled looters. You ever look at a boarded-up window and just assume the house is empty? That instinct has been around for a long time. And in World War II, civilians turned it into a weapon of misdirection. In cities from Antwerp to Rotterdam, families who couldn't evacuate had to disappear their homes in plain sight. The trick? Create the illusion of damage, even when the window was intact. They'd remove or cover panes with painted plywood, soot-stained cardboard, or even hand-drawn cracks and scorch marks. Sometimes they'd blacken the window entirely with soot and grease, then hammer scrap wood haphazardly across the exterior. The goal wasn't security. It was deterrence through despair. If your home looked like it had already been looted or abandoned, it became less of a target. Fast forward to now, and this tactic still works. You can purchase faux boarded window decals or install temporary exterior storm panels with distressed finishes. In a long-term crisis, especially one involving civil unrest or mass displacement, appearing poor or destroyed is safer than looking prepared. In fact, in a 2020 study on post-disaster looting in hurricane-affected U.S. zones, nearly 65% of looters admitted targeting homes that looked untouched. The best-looking houses were hit first. During wartime, civilians knew this. That's why so many chose illusion over confrontation. So ask yourself, if the grid goes down, would your home be too visible? In a survival situation, invisibility isn't a luxury, it's protection. And with just a few sheets of plywood, some old soot, or a convincing wrap, your windows can vanish into the background, just like they did in 1943 Berlin. Number 4. The inward swing latch trap, a trick so obscure. Even veterans forgot it. Okay, now we're going deep cut here. Most people today don't even realize windows could be booby-trapped without wires or explosives. But in World War II Italy, especially in countryside villas occupied or abandoned during the German retreat, locals used what's now called the inward swing latch trap. Here's how it worked. Older European homes often had inward swinging shutters or inner window panels. Civilians would rig these using tensioned wire or spring latches connected to metal pans, bells, or in some cases actual furniture. If the shutter or window opened even slightly, the wire would release, and bang! You'd hear the crash from across the house. But it wasn't just an alarm. The real magic was psychological. German patrols and looters hated unknowns. They weren't scared of violence, but of surprises. And this kind of jerry-rigged trap made intruders second-guess everything. Today, this trick has a modern echo. Survivalists recreate it using magnetic window alarms, spring-loaded dowels, or fishing line connected to drop objects. You don't need electricity, just tension, noise, and smart placement. A 2019 home security test showed that even minor trip alarms can reduce attempted second-floor break-ins by 70%, simply because they create uncertainty. Back in World War II, that's exactly what civilians were counting on. Imagine a window opens half an inch, and suddenly a metal pot crashes to the floor inside. Even if you're not home, that noise changes the dynamic. The looter now knows someone might be there. They don't want to be caught, so they leave. It's the sound of resistance, and sometimes that's enough to save your life. So yeah, the inward swing latch isn't glamorous, but it's a piece of civilian battlefield engineering that still has teeth today. Number 3. The oil slick window trap, a greasy, slippery surprise from occupied France. Now hold on to your seat because this one's downright devious and criminally underrated. In the French countryside during Nazi occupation, some villagers couldn't afford tape, wire, or guards, but they had one thing in abundance: used cooking oil. What they did with it was pure brilliance. The trick? They coated the exterior windowsill and bottom frame with thick layers of old grease, lard, or motor oil. The idea was this: looters or soldiers would try to climb in, grip the edge, or step onto a ledge, and slip. It didn't always stop them, but it brought just enough chaos to alert the homeowner, trigger a crash, or cause a retreat. It was the home defense equivalent of a banana peel. And in more than one recorded instance, it led to patrolmen injuring themselves badly enough to abandon the raid entirely. Today, this technique can be modernized using non-toxic lubricants, silicone sprays, or synthetic grease, coated in key intrusion zones like window ledges, fence tops, or balcony rails. In a survival scenario, especially where lethal defense isn't an option, or legality is a concern, non-lethal dissuasion is critical. An intruder who falls, fumbles, or looks like a fool is more likely to retreat than escalate. And here's the kicker: it's nearly invisible. At night, no looter's going to spot a slicked-up sill, but they'll feel it the second they grab it. In World War II, this technique didn't just protect homes, it humiliated the enemy. And humiliation, in a time of war or collapse, is one of the most effective deterrents there is. It's a slap in the dark that says, not this house, not today. Number 2. The bar soap smoke window test. World War II's dirt-cheap snoop detector. Now, what if I told you a 10-cent bar of soap could tell you instantly if someone's been tampering with your window? No electronics, no cameras, no batteries. Just a wartime trick pulled straight from the resistance playbook. Here's how it worked. In Nazi-occupied Poland and Yugoslavia, civilians under constant threat of raids needed a way to detect if someone had tried to open or even touch a window while they were gone. Enter the bar soap trick. They would take a cheap bar of black or gray soap, rub it in a thin, even layer across the window seam, and coat the latch, frame edges, and sill. Then they'd blow candle smoke over it, or use soot from a cooking fire, to create a faint carbon layer. Now, here's the genius. If anyone touched the window, even slightly, fingerprints, smears, or pressure marks would appear on the smoke film. It was a passive intrusion alert system. Silent, invisible in dim light, and almost impossible for an intruder to notice. Today, we replicate this using graphite powder, UV reactive powders, or fine soot layers on vulnerable points. In espionage and forensic circles, this is still called tattletaling. You mark a surface without the enemy realizing it, and any disturbance leaves a signature. It's old-school counterintelligence, and in a grid-down, raw, without rule of law scenario, this could be your only clue that someone's casing your home. A smear on the window, a half-wiped line. That's your early warning to escalate security before a break-in. This wasn't just a trick. It was civilian spycraft, born in the shadows of war, and it still works better than half the overpriced gadgets on Amazon. Number 1. The multi-pane death grid, the most ruthless civilian window defense of World War II. All right, you've made it to number 1. And let me warn you, this one's brutal, forgotten by textbooks, buried by time, and absolutely unforgiving. In bombed-out districts of Leningrad and Warsaw, some civilians built what came to be known as the multi-pane death grid, a name whispered with both awe and discomfort. The concept: take a standard multi-pane window, those classic wood-framed ones with 6, 9, or even 12 little squares, and weaponize the gaps. Civilians would fill every other pane with sharp debris set in homemade resin or tar, broken glass, rusted nails, metal shards. Then they'd reinforce the wooden muntins, those thin dividers between panes, with internal rods or nails creating a maze of rigid death boxes that couldn't be shattered all at once. Here's why it was terrifying. If a looter or soldier tried to smash their way through, only one tiny pane would break, not the whole window. And behind that one broken pane, shrapnel embedded in glue, ready to cut, blind, or maim. They called it the death grid because it turned entry into surgery. Today, this can be recreated using polycarbonate inserts in a custom grid frame, with alternating panes filled with epoxy-glued broken ceramics or tempered glass shards. It's legal, silent, and terrifying. In close-quarter riot scenarios, police-grade riot shields use a similar concept. Segment the surface so it can't be compromised all at once. Think about that. One big pane is a liability. 12 little ones? That's a chessboard of pain. The Nazis feared it. The Soviets used it. And if the lights go out and things get desperate, it might just be the most savage low-tech home defense trick left in existence. And it all starts with a window frame. So now you know what the history books left out the survivors never forgot. 8 simple tricks, devised by civilians under fire, using tape, grease, mesh, and raw human desperation to turn fragile panes of glass into barriers that fought back. And today, in a world that's one blackout, one cyber attack, or one natural disaster away from chaos, these tricks matter more than ever, because let's be real, the moment the grid goes down, your window becomes an invitation to looters, to opportunists, to the desperate. They don't care about your alarm system. They care that glass is silent when it breaks in a storm, and fast when it shatters in the dark. But now you've got something they don't. Knowledge, history's playbook, and it works. That wire mesh you install today might stop a home invasion tomorrow. That oil on your sill could send a prowler running. That homemade window grid might just buy your family the time they need to survive. Because here's the truth, no one likes to say out loud. When society breaks down, it's not the strongest who make it. It's the most prepared. And sometimes, preparation starts with something as simple as a window. If you value this kind of wartime wisdom, real defense from real history, subscribe to Warfield Survival and pass this on to someone who still thinks safety comes from calling 911. Because in the worst moments, the only person who's going to save you is you.